And now, of course, it wouldn't be a Fed presentation if I didn't share with you our standard Fed disclaimer. The views expressed in the presentation today and tomorrow are ours and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the Federal Reserve Banks of Atlanta, Cleveland, Richmond, Kansas City, St. Louis, or the Federal Reserve System. Now, as we think of the Federal Reserve System, let's take a look at a map of the Federal Reserve, and we will do that with our next slide. And here, if you would, I'd like for you to hone in, and I apologize, or just how about for those of you who are outside the United States, how about you select and have a sister city, sister bank that you would like to select. And what I want you to do is, once again, use the Slido. You'll be using the Slido poll, and you'll be letting us know in that question which one of the districts is the one you reside. Now, this is going to be the word cloud type of polls. That means you can be as exact as you would like. You can type in that you are from the Jacksonville branch of the Atlanta Fed, or you can just say 6, or you can type in that you are from Kansas City, or type in 10, or Oklahoma City, whichever you prefer. But please let us know which district is your home district. And here's the poll. Great. It's so much fun to see that we have people from East Coast and West Coast, whether it's Philadelphia or Boston. We have south to Houston, San Francisco to the west. We have the Charlotte branch of Richmond. I'll give you another moment because I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to vote. I love it that someone's in Mississippi, and because Mississippi is a state that is shared by both the 6th and the 8th districts. And that points out how across the United States, these 12 districts do include portions of different states. And one of the joys we have working together as system economic education colleagues is that we often then get to partner and work with our colleagues that work in other Federal Reserve banks that are in the same state. And now I'd like to think for a moment, and what I want to do in the session that I have this morning is to try to help make some connections between the Fed and education. As educators, you are very important to us. And when you look across the 12 Federal Reserve districts that were represented in the poll today, the approach that each one of those Federal Reserve District banks sometimes is different. There are some districts that have pulled away from focusing on economic education, but they still share the same goals of the Fed that we're going to be talking about. And I hope that those of you who are joining us today realize that all the resources that are created by all of the districts are accessible to you in the US or outside the US also. So now we'd like to know, what is your connection to education? And to determine that, if you would please use the Slido poll to let us know your role in education. I see that we have several people who are high school teachers. We have colleagues from the Federal Reserve System, some college and either college professors, instructors, some people who are in administration or curriculum coordination, and even some non-educators who are interested. It looks like from this poll that a majority of you in the audience today are high school educators. But whether you are a high school educator, administrator, non-educator, or Federal Reserve employee, college instructor, you're all very welcome. And we hope that today's sessions and tomorrow's will provide you with worthwhile and useful information that you can use with your students. Now, as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Fed. And of course, I need to go back to the beginning of the Federal Reserve System. And in doing that, we know that the Fed is not directly in the Constitution, but it was created by the US Congress, all right? And it is the third iteration of our central banking system. And so it has the basic structure, as you can see, that the Congress has created it. And then from there, they created it to be a federal structure this time around. As I said, it's the third iteration. And so there are the 12 banks, the regional part, and then there's the national part, the Board of Governors, and they work together as part of the FOMC. So now I would like to ask another poll question to find out if you know the names of the two newest members that the president has appointed and have been confirmed as members of the Board of Governors. So stop and think about it for a moment. These are the two newest members on the Board of Governors. This may be a little bit inside baseball. We will find out. So I'm giving you some choices here. Please use your spider. Oh, we have a real split here. So the two newest members that were recently appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate as members of the Board of Governors. I'm learning about and having fun with the Slido poll. And one of the things that I realize with an active poll is that I can look up in the corner and see how many people have voted. And so I see there are several people who haven't yet voted, and I'll give you just a little bit more time. I spent 28 years as a classroom educator, and so I realized that wait time is something that everyone must be given an opportunity to have. And one of the joys for me as a classroom teacher was to try to help my students discover and get to know something that they didn't know previously. And so that means for me that today is a win, all right? I gave you what would be a very tough question here, all right? And so as I move forward with the answer, because it's not fair to ask people questions and not then provide the answers, I will share that every one of these people listed here are all currently members of the Board of Governors. But if we dig in a little deeper, we will find that the process and why some of the names are very familiar to you is that perhaps you've seen them in the news, right? So I'm going to go over the different parts about the Board of Governors in just a moment. But for anyone who really is interested in finding out the answer to the question, the two newest people. And that answer, it's Lisa Cook and Philip Jefferson. All right. Now, these other names are in the news. Christopher Waller would be the next newest one after Lisa Cook and Philip Jefferson. He is the former research director at the St. Louis Fed. And Michelle Bowman is also a current member. And Jerome Powell and Lael Brainerd probably sound very familiar to you. And part of the reason they might be familiar to you is because Jerome Powell is the current chair, and he was just reappointed to a four-year term as the chair. And so Lael Brainerd also has been in the news because she was reappointed as the vice chair, but they aren't new members. But they were both reappointed and confirmed by the Senate. With the Board of Governors, what they do is they actually write the regulations, and they're involved for financial institutions. They are involved in the monetary policy input and making monetary policy, and they exercise oversight over the 12 Federal Reserve banks. I do want to note that the Federal Reserve is an independent agency of the U.S. government. And so the Board of Governors chair is not the same as one of the cabinet secretaries. As an independent agency, even though they're appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, it is meant to be independent. Therefore, a president who disagrees with policy decisions of the Federal Reserve, of the chair, does not have the authority to remove the chair of the Fed. When they're in full complement, there are 7 members. And right now, there are only 6 members on the Board of Governors. Currently, there is another person who is going through the confirmation process that has been appointed, but he hasn't been confirmed yet. And if you're really in for a trivia thing, his name is Michael Barr, but he has not yet been confirmed. So he is not a member of the Board of Governors. And I will not speculate as to whether or not he will be confirmed. Now, besides the Board of Governors part, that national portion, all right, there's also the regional portion. So this map that you saw before shows those 12 regional banks. The 12 regional banks across the country are private nonprofits that are each governed by their own board of directors. For example, if you were to send me an email, my email would be a .org, O-R-G, as would any of my colleagues that are sharing with you today and tomorrow. However, our system colleagues that work at the Board of Governors, if you were to email them, their email address is .gov. You might say, okay, what is the importance and the difference of this? Well, part of the reason it's important and different is in structures, we find that these 12 banks across the country have their own board of directors, and this board of directors within each system selects the president for the bank, and then that president has to be approved by the Board of Governors. But they bring in grassroots information about what's going on in the economy and provide this economic information that then each bank president can take to those FOMC meetings. And so they really get input from all across the country. And that helps with making monetary policy decisions. To be on the Board of Governors, they also, provide and give the board information from the banking communities and the public at large from each area. Now, looking at the overall big structure, we find that we have our central bank, we have those 3 entities that I've already mentioned, but overall, through the years, it has evolved into having 5 key functions. Now, when we think of those 5 key functions of the Federal Reserve System, each one plays a very important role in supporting the overall U.S. economy. But the focus of the sessions for today and tomorrow will be primarily focusing on monetary policy and the twin goals of the Federal Reserve. I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention the other parts. And so I will quickly do that. One, it has to do with the importance of having and maintaining financial stability. When we think back as to why Congress created the Fed in 1913, in part, it was a reaction to the financial panics of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So monitoring risk across the system is a key and important function of the Federal Reserve. Another important function is to supervise and regulate the financial institutions and their activities. And in doing that, Congress passes laws about, how they, authority that either they give the Fed or guidance as to what they want to see done, but actual carrying out the regulations, that drafting is done, and the guidelines are often done by the Board of Governors. And the Board of Governors seeks, public comment, and they give an opportunity to respond, and it's all part of a review process. And so the carrying out of those regulations after they've been put together, the carrying out is often done by the banks, the 12 reserve banks across the country. Because at each one of those banks, there are trained bank examiners who go out into the various institutions. So if you're wondering, okay, who is it the Fed goes out and looks after? Well, I think this is a useful chart in that it shows the financial industry and who regulates which particular areas. As you can see, this diagram is color coded, and it shows that all of the dark green and all of the green circles are all regulated by the Federal Reserve. There are some institutions that are not regulated by the Federal Reserve. For example, you can find that we all seem to love these acronyms, but the National Credit Union Administration, it is the more sort of wine colored. They look after, regulate certain entities, and we find that the FDIC, also the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, they take care of the state chartered savings associations, and we also find that there are a few non-member banks, but for the most part, most of the oversight and regulation and examination is done by the Federal Reserve. And now, of course, besides overseeing for stability and enforcing regulations, fostering this payment system and making sure that people's checks are quickly and safely and efficiently deposited, and transferring funds, whether it's currency, whether it's checks, whether it's using the large automated clearinghouse system, the ACH system, or whether it's the large wholesale payment system. This is all part of something that the Fed oversees. So by providing this cash to banks and clearing the checks and providing the electronic debit and deposits through the ACH system and FedWire for the large financial institution, the Fed acts as the fiscal agent for the federal government, which means it's the bank for the government. Now, one of the things that to me is kind of fun, and if you have a dollar bill handy, well, get it out and look at it. And if you don't, I often find that I don't carry any cash anymore. So if you don't, please just use this one as an example. What I'd like for you to do is look very closely at the top of the bill. And if you look, you will find on all currency, it's going to say the same thing. Perhaps you already knew that all currency is actually a Federal Reserve note, right? But if you didn't, that's another thing perhaps that you have learned today. So now let's look and see. If you look at George Washington's face, and then go a little bit to the left of his face, you're going to see that there is a letter and then a little number. So please look at that, because those are going to be clues, all right? The clues that will help you know which bank, all right, issued this Federal Reserve note. So look at it very closely, because if you haven't already guessed, yes, you are going to get an opportunity to share your knowledge and vote in an upcoming Slido poll. And so here is your poll. Please tell me, which city is the home of the Federal Reserve Bank, which issued the Federal Reserve note that I just shared with you on the last slide? It was not meant to be an eye chart test. I realized that if you were trying to read around the letter, it was going to be really difficult. But this can be a really fun activity to do with your students, to have them do this in our warm-up session. My friend Leslie shared that she'd been in a workshop that a teacher does this with his class, and he already has them memorized. And so I'll share with you the trick here so that you know which one it is. I am seeing 33 people voting here, but I know we have more than that, so I'm going to give you a little bit more time. Also, the hint that remember the letter and the number correlate with the city, the bank, but it's not alphabetical. All right, I am seeing big and green of New York, and I'm also seeing NYC and New York City, and someone who types just like me. And so there's kind of a consensus here. And someone also put in the number 2 because they remember that there was a 2 on there, which is true. It was B2. I am seeing a bunch of things that are coming in the chat. Robin, is there anything in the chat that we need to, that I should be aware of?
No, not at this time.
Well, thank you. Thanks for checking. Brian wants a prize. I don't blame you, Brian. You know, people respond to incentives. I see that. And your students will too. I think one of the incentives that everyone who's presenting today is that we're hopeful that you will be able to attend in-person sessions in the region that's closest to you, because all of our banks are getting back to doing in-person sessions, so that we're hopeful to have you join us or to be able to do that, because in-person sessions are much easier to provide prizes. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to do a zoom in so it's easier for everyone to see the correct answer. All right, so here, for me, as my eyes have gone dim in a service of my students and now the Federal Reserve, it helps me to see that indeed, as many of you put in as the correct answer, 2B would be New York. And so this particular note was initially shared with us from New York. So anyway, this is enough fun that you could use at a trivia night or any kind of function is something that generally students like it, and it's something fun that you can share with them. But getting back to the basic functions of the Fed, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the notion of the Federal Reserve System also is intent on trying to make sure that all communities are being served. And so the Federal Reserve does work to ensure that financial institutions that it supervises are complying with the laws that protect consumers. And one of the key functions of the Fed is to try to promote consumer protection and also community development. The regional approach is used for this, and the board has delegated the examination authority to the 12 banks, and also they have focused much of the community development also to the 12 banks. And I know across the system, some outreach and focus has gone more in this direction. So it might be in your district too. So now, as I bring our focus back around to education again, I would like to ask you the question. I would assume that some of you have been on committees that help to draft a mission statement for your school. If you would please, once again, use that same Slido poll and let me know, have you been involved, yes or no, in drafting a mission statement for your school or for your district? It looks like it varies, perhaps by region. But for me, for my years as a classroom teacher, somehow or other, I landed on committees more than once to work on district mission statements and also to work on mission statements for schools. Perhaps partially because I had the good fortune to help open a school. That was why I got an opportunity to do this. But for those of you who aren't as you haven't really done mission statements before, I'm sure everyone has heard of mission statements before. But generally speaking, the mission statement is going to be the overarching goal of what a school or a group intends to do. And the reason I bring that up is that for the Federal Reserve, even though we were created in 1913, Congress has always had control in the sense and helped to focus and shape because we were created by an act of Congress, and sometimes they have passed new legislation that would alter and shape. And they did that in 1978 specifically, and they passed legislation that's often referred to as the Humphrey-Hawkins legislation, and they revised the mission statement for the Federal Reserve. Mission statements are supposed to give clarity and allow entities to better understand what it is they're supposed to be doing, all right? And besides revising the mission statement at that time, they also made sure that the Fed would be transparent in that they would come, the chairman of the Fed would come before Congress and give an update of what it is the Fed is doing. And since that time, the Federal Reserve has gone more frequently before Congress, the chair and different members of the Board of Governors. And after every FOMC meeting, the chair now has a press conference and they issue a detailed statement. So they're trying to be very transparent about what's going on with monetary policy. From that, I want to get to what the mission is for the Fed, all right? And that mission, as we look at it, is to promote co-equally these two objectives. And these objectives are our focus for today and tomorrow. The idea of having maximum employment and having price stability. Now, this Federal Reserve dual mandate, when we look at it, we know that it has evolved when we think of the evolution of that, we know that in 1913, really trying to make sure that we had an elastic currency. All right, that was a challenge at the time when the Fed was first created, because at that time the United States was still on a gold standard. By 1933, later when there were revisions, and it was in 1935 with the Banking Act of 1935 that they created the Federal Open Market Committee. And so there had been some, people weren't quite sure, well, what's more important, the idea of having employment, maximum employment, or having price stability. And so in 1978, by saying these are both really super important, these are goals of the Fed, and that we're supposed to keep that in mind. Now, one of the things that is accompanying these two goals is the idea that they want to promote long-run growth and want to make sure that we have, moderate long-term interest rates. And so the technical name for that legislation was the Full Employment and Balanced Growth Act of 1978. Now, that leads to why we're together with you today, because your students aren't going to know what maximum employment is if you don't teach them. Most everyone wants to have a job of some sort, wants to have a career. But how do you get that career? Only if you have skills, only if you have knowledge and information that someone would hire you to use. And so as educators, you are critical to on the front lines of achieving maximum employment. And so that is part of the reason why today my colleagues are going to share with you teaching tools that you can use in your classroom to help your students understand what employment is, how to be employed, and how employment is measured, or usually it's in the category, how unemployment is measured. And that's one part of it. The other portion is controlling inflation. Now, inflation is mentioned in the news daily right now, but your students, how are they going to know what inflation it is, how it's measured, and why it matters if you don't teach them? Controlling the money supply is at the core mission of the Fed. And right now, taming inflation is something that they are working very ardently to do without causing a recession and job loss. That is definitely foremost on the minds of all the FOMC members. So when you read about a soft landing, what they're looking to do is how they can bring down inflation and not crash the job outlook. So today you'll get a chance to listen and learn about tools that you can use to teach about those things. So when we look at the dual mandate and the mission, one of the things to look at and think about is, okay, so these are the people that make this, and how do they get together? They do meet in Washington, D.C. at the Board of Governors, right? And they vote 8 times a year. But when they vote, every bank president doesn't vote, all right? Only the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, where the trading desk is, votes in every meeting. And then there's a rotation between the other banks. However, all 12 bank presidents go, they all speak, and they definitely build a consensus. This little infographic was created by our colleagues at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And so it's something that it's downloadable, it's free. So if you want to use it, you can easily access that too. Now, when we think about economic education, and we think about what we are doing, I think it's worthwhile to note how the Fed implements monetary policy. And if this seems confusing to you, stay tuned, because this afternoon, my colleague Scott Walla will be sharing with you exactly how the Fed currently implements monetary policy. And so I welcome, he will welcome any questions and things that you might have. Also, I do want to note that we have monies that the Fed makes, all right, from the various portfolios, and all that money is then remitted back to the U.S. Treasury. All right. So at this time, I am looking here to see if I am horribly over or if we're in good shape, and it looks like I might be running a tad over. So I had better get on to questions and a stretch break. So, are there any questions out there from anyone? If not, I think I definitely owe you a stretch break. Are there any questions coming up in the chat? Robin?
Hi, yes, we've had a few questions concerning access to the slides. So I did let everyone know that a recording will be made available. And as we also explain all of our resources, we do have slides that are available to educators.
Yes, Robin. And one of the things that we'll do at the end of the day is we will share all of our contact links. And if anyone would want a copy of these, I'll be happy to email them. Just email me and I'll be happy to send them to you. Are there any other questions?
No other questions right now. There was a question if someone could leave and rejoin, and I said yes, they could.
Yes, technology is something that we all work with every day. We're very dependent on. At the same time, it's like I feel like we're also at its mercy. So if we're all very much hoping that we don't have technical difficulties, but it happens to everyone. So. Yes, there's a great deal of information about the Fed and the original Fed mission, all kinds of information out there. I tried to not belabor it too much, but to give you a little bit of detail. So I really appreciate your attention. And at this time, I'm looking at my watch and I'm thinking that it's actually, we have 3 more minutes if anyone else has a question. I'm happy to, if you would, put them in the chat. I think I might have had it for a Slido, but I don't think I did it right. Nope, I'm pretty sure I didn't do that one right, so I'm going to go forward. Okay. Well, I'm peeking at the chat right now, and I want to say thank you for your attention. I am going to stop sharing, and Deanna is going to give you a timer break so that you get to know how much time is left. And thanks for being with us, and I'll talk to you soon.